Asgard was enveloped in a golden glow as the city of the Norse gods celebrated a harvest festival. Laughter and music echoed through the halls, while the gods gathered around tables adorned with all kinds of delicacies. However, a shadow loomed over the festivities: Thor's absence. Odin, seated on his throne, observed the joy around him, but his expression was one of concern. He knew that without his son, Asgard was vulnerable. "We need Thor," Freya said, her clear voice cutting through the music. "Without him, we are exposed to any threat." "I agree, Freya," Odin replied, narrowing his eyes. "But he is far away on a journey. We must act immediately." The gods began to murmur, uneasy. Loki, ever cunning, stood up with a mischievous smile. "Why don't we build a wall? That way, even without Thor, we'll be protected from any danger that may arise." "A wall?" Balder, the god of light, questioned. "But that would take time and effort. And who would have the strength for such a task?" "A giant could do it," Loki continued, his mind racing. "Someone who wouldn't mind the labor." The meeting, once filled with joy, was now fraught with uncertainty. The gods hesitated, exchanging worried glances. Freya frowned. "And how can we trust a giant? They are known for their cunning and treachery. But what if the giant is powerful enough? We need a solution, and fast." Loki insisted, his shrewd gaze shining with an idea that was beginning to take shape in his mind. Just then, the door to the hall swung open with a bang, and a colossal giant, Hrimthurs, strode into the room. His imposing presence made the gods take a step back. "I have heard your concerns," he said, his voice rumbling like thunder. "I can build the wall. In a year, it will be complete. But in return, I wish to have the goddess Freya as my wife." A heavy silence fell over the room as the gods processed the giant's audacious proposal. Freya looked at Odin, her eyes filled with disbelief. Loki, on the other hand, smiled intrigued. He saw an opportunity in Hrimthur's words, a chance to manipulate the situation to his advantage. "Accept the challenge," he whispered to Odin. "He won't be able to finish the work in time." The gods were in shock, but the urgency of the situation began to prevail. Constructing a wall could be the solution they so desperately needed. "We need to make a decision now," Odin declared, his voice firm, though uncertainty flickered in his gaze. As the murmurs grew louder, Loki knew he had to act quickly to ensure the proposal did not become a reality. Tension hung in the air, and the fate of Asgard was about to change forever. Hrimthur stood tall before the wall under construction, his muscles rippling as he effortlessly lifted enormous stones, leaving the gods in awe. With each block he placed, the wall became more majestic, reflecting Asgard's golden light. Loki, watching the giant's work, couldn't contain a malicious laugh. "Look at him. Does he really think he can finish this on time? A giant so huge and yet so slow." He turned to the other gods, who exchanged nervous glances. "This is a challenge we must not underestimate, Loki," Odin warned in his deep, authoritative voice. "If Hrimthur succeeds, Freya will be his. We cannot let that happen." "Oh, but perhaps we need a plan, don't we?" Loki replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "What if I could delay him a bit? It would be a fun game." The god of trickery was already plotting his next move. As days passed and the wall took shape, Loki began to feel the weight of responsibility. The giant worked tirelessly, almost as if determined to fulfill his promise. "I can't let him win. If he succeeds, Freya's honor will be at stake, and above all, my pride," Loki thought, his mind buzzing with ideas. In the dead of night, deciding it was time to act, Loki transformed into a stunning mare. He made his way to Svartalfari, Hrimthur's magnificent horse, who was resting after a hard day's work. With a soft whinny, Loki caught the horse's attention. "Come with me, beautiful Svartalfari. There's a world of fun out there, far from this boring wall." Svartalfari, enchanted by the mare's presence, followed Loki without hesitation. As they raced away, Loki could hear the distant sound of Hrimthur's hammer, each strike echoing like a reminder of the urgency of the situation. This should delay him long enough, Loki thought, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. He knew he was playing with fire, but the idea of seeing the giant fail was too tempting to resist. The sun was slowly setting on the horizon of Asgard, painting the sky orange and purple as Hrimthurs, the giant, faced the absence of his faithful horse, Svadelfari. He furrowed his brow, feeling frustration build within him like a storm about to erupt. "What kind of helper is late at a time like this?" he muttered to himself, his voice echoing off the stone wall he had begun to raise. Looking at the unfinished structure, Hrimthurs realized that time was running out. The stones were piled haphazardly, and the giant's strength alone was not enough to compensate for the absence of his horse. "Come on, Svadelfari. What could be more important than this work?" he shouted, hoping his cry would reach the lost horse. The only response was the silence of dusk, broken by the distant sounds of the gods watching, concerned. Meanwhile, Loki, still disguised as a mare, hid in a nearby clearing, watching the scene with a mix of amusement and unease. He never imagined the giant would be so dedicated. Hrimthurs' determination left him doubting his own strategy. "What am I doing?" he thought, feeling a growing discomfort in his chest. "This giant really wants to fulfill his agreement. What if he succeeds? What will happen to me and Freya?" As time continued to pass, Hrimthurs, exhausted, looked at the wall once more. "If this isn't finished, we'll not only lose the agreement, but also the honor of Asgard," he growled, his voice resonating with the intensity of thunder. The gods, watching from a distance, began to worry. Odin, with his piercing gaze, said, "We need a plan, or the wall will be our ruin." Loki, still debating with himself, heard Odin's words and decided he needed to act, even if it meant continuing with his plan. He took a deep breath, but the thought of going against the giant's determination weighed heavily on his conscience. "What's more important, Loki? The salvation of Asgard or your cunning?" he whispered to himself as night fell, bringing with it the tension that hung over the realm. The sun dipped below the horizon, tinting the sky orange and purple as Hrimthurs approached the wall, now nearly complete. He looked at the stones that had been raised with such strength and determination, a smile of satisfaction appearing on his tired face. However, the joy was quickly replaced by frustration as he realized time was running out, and the agreement was about to be broken. With a roar of impotence, he raised his arms, challenging the gods who watched in silence. "I cannot fail now. The wall is almost ready," Hrimthurs shouted, his voice echoing like thunder among the stone columns. The gods, gathered in a small council atop a hill, exchanged worried glances. Loki, with a nervous smile, tried to hide the growing unease that consumed him. He, who had orchestrated the sabotage, now felt the weight of his actions. The possibility of Hrimthurs completing the wall before the deadline terrified him. "We need to do something, or he'll fulfill his part," exclaimed Freya, her hands tightening in a gesture of concern. "No one imagined he would be so diligent." "Maybe it's time to intensify our strategy," murmured Loki, his mind racing with ideas. I can do more." And so, in a twist of desperation, Loki decided that it wasn't just the construction of the wall that needed interference, but the very essence of the giant. He felt guilty for what he had done, but the responsibility weighing on his shoulders propelled him to act. Meanwhile, Hrimthurs, in a moment of despair, sensed a change in the air. He looked around, noting that Svadelfari, his faithful horse, was still absent. Fury began to rise within him. "Who is behind this?" he roared, his voice resonating like an echo of a storm about to form. The truth soon revealed itself. A faint trail of magic, though subtle, guided him to the source of the sabotage. Upon realizing that Loki was responsible, Hrimthurs felt his insides twist. "Loki, I knew I couldn't trust you," he roared, his colossal form transforming, his fury turning him into an even more terrifying being. The gods, alarmed, began to prepare themselves. Odin rose, his expression grave. "It's time for us to unite. Asgard will not be threatened by a giant, not while we stand together." As tension escalated, Loki, now aware of the real consequences of his actions, found himself at a crossroads. What should have been a cruel prank was now turning into a battle of life or death. He looked at the gods, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. The wall, which was meant to be a protection, was now becoming a battlefield. And the true battle was just beginning. The sky darkened as Thor, the god of thunder, prepared to face Hrymthurs. Lightning sliced through the clouds, illuminating the battlefield with an almost supernatural light. The air was thick with tension, and the gods of Asgard, gathered on a nearby hill, watched with unease. Odin, with his keen gaze, assessed every movement of his son, while Freya, anxious, held Loki's hand, who seemed more restless than ever. "Thor, be careful," Freya shouted, her voice echoing across the vastness. "The giant's strength is immense. He is no match for the fury of Mjolnir," Thor replied, raising his hammer, which glowed with its own light. "He will pay for his audacity." Hrymthurs, towering and colossal, roared in anger at the sight of the god who dared to challenge him. "Little god, do you think you can stop me? Your wall will not protect Asgard from my might." With an agile movement, Thor launched himself at the giant, delivering a powerful blow with Mjolnir. The sound of the impact reverberated across the field, making the ground tremble. Hrymthurs shook his head in surprise, but quickly regained his composure and countered with a devastating punch that Thor had to dodge. "If you think you can win, you are very mistaken," Thor shouted as he spun his hammer, gathering energy. "Asgard will not fall today." The gods cheered, shouting words of encouragement. Loki, standing off to the side, watched the battle with a mix of apprehension and admiration. He knew that Thor's victory would mean salvation for Asgard, but he also felt the weight of his own betrayal. The battle intensified. Hrymthurs tried to bring down the wall with his brute strength, but Thor, always a step ahead, delivered precise blows that echoed like thunder. "Strength alone is not everything, giant," Thor roared, his voice booming like thunder. In a decisive moment, with fury building inside him, Thor raised Mjolnir above his head, concentrating all the energy he could muster. The sky lit up once more, as if the gods themselves were watching with anticipation. "This is the end for you," he shouted, and with a powerful motion, he charged at Hrymthurs. The precise strike hit the giant with all the force of thunder, and Hrymthurs, finally defeated, collapsed to the ground, dissolving into shadows and echoes of his own rage. The gods erupted in a victory cheer, their voices merging into a chorus of celebration. Thor, panting, gazed at where Hrymthurs had been, aware that although the battle was won, the fight to protect Asgard would never truly end. The battle had concluded, and the scent of earth and lightning still lingered in the air. Loki, still in the form of a mare, moved away from the scene of destruction, his soft hooves touching the soft ground of Asgard. A tremor ran through his body as he felt the urge to give birth. In an instant, a magnificent eight-legged horse, Sleipnir, emerged under the light of the sun that was beginning to shine once again. Odin, who had been observing the scene with a look of admiration, approached. "It is impressive, Loki. What you have brought into the world is truly magnificent," Odin said, with a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Loki, still confused and surprised by what had just happened, looked at his newborn son. "I didn't expect this," he replied, his voice filled with emotion. "Sleipnir is an unexpected gift, but I hope he brings more than just beauty." As the tension of the battle dissipated, the gods gathered in a grand hall of Asgard, where golden light reflected off the ornate walls. Freya, with a serious expression, raised her voice. "My dear brothers and sisters, after what we have experienced, it is time to discuss the future of our realm. This wall, which many thought was merely a protection, is also a symbol of our unity." The gods murmured among themselves, surprised by the revelation. "Did you know all this, Freya?" Balder asked loudly. "Did you know that Hrymthurs had a different purpose?" Freya nodded. "Yes, he and Loki have a history that goes beyond any rivalry. What happened was a lesson, a test of our loyalty and strength." At that moment, Loki stepped forward, his form as a mare now gone, revealing the cunning god. Hrymthurs was not just a giant, but an ally in a plot aimed at uniting us. His defeat was a charade to show us that we are stronger together. The revelation hit the gods like a silent thunder as they absorbed Loki's words. Odin, with a contemplative look, finally spoke. If Hrymthurs reveals himself as a guardian, then we must honor him. The wall is not only our physical protection, but also a symbol of what we can build together. Sleipnir, standing beside Loki, neighed as if understanding the significance of the moment. The gods, now with newfound understanding, joined in a circle, ready to face any challenges the future might hold. The walls of Asgard were not just a defense against threats, but also a celebration of the strength and unity of the gods, and they were ready to write a new story together.